To introduce myself, I started out as an English language teacher, working in Austrian and Swiss state and private schools, colleges and universities. Then I became an English language teacher trainer for Cambridge University. I worked all around the world certifying new English language teachers. And then more recently I have been conducting research into language policy, social justice and education in the Global South. I worked in Colombian Higher Education for 4 years, and I have been at Liverpool Hope for just under 3 years. So this article is, it draws on existing research and publicly available data to highlight how Colombian higher education has been undergirded by a neoliberal policy agenda. Some of the changes include the introduction of standardized testing in order to enter university and also when exiting university, privatization, cost cutting and cost sharing, and the prioritization of technical and technological education. These changes have broadened access to higher education for some Colombians, but it has left many with unsustainable student debt and has contributed to the underfunding of public universities, which typically serve poorer students. A prioritization of career pathways that contribute to the country's economic growth, while ignoring the role of higher education in the full development of the human personality, is also not consistent with sustainable development. And this is particularly important in a country such as Colombia, which is emerging from 5 decades of civil war. And I think there is a role for higher education to play in this country in consolidating peace and strengthening democracy. I worked in Colombia between 2017 and 2021. And while I was there, I lived very close to a public university. And this university was frequently on strike, and the protests would block the streets. And I knew very little about the reasons for this strike. So I explored the reasons for this, and I realized that there's very little in the way of empirical research into the reasons behind the discontent in the public sector. One of the main reasons for the strikes was the neoliberalization of higher education, which meant that its progressive privatization and the siphoning of state funds to the private sector at the expense of the underfunded public sector. So I was unable to find any article which charts the neoliberal development of Colombian higher education over the last few decades. Linking this to the Sustainable Development Goals was a way of showing how the neoliberal turn in Colombian higher education, while potentially widening access to higher education, does not promote sustainable development. So the Colombian government has signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, but this is at odds with what has been, until the election of its most recent Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, a progressive neoliberalization of higher education. We can never really guess what the exact impact is going to be, but I hope that the article highlights the issues with neoliberalism in education, which is a problem not only in Colombia but globally, and we've seen this in UK higher education for the last 3 or 4 decades. So such articles raise awareness of the incompatibility of neoliberalism with, in higher education with the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are 2 versions of loan schemes for students. In this country we have income contingent loan schemes, which means that you pay according to how much money you earn. And another model, which is the typical model in Colombia, is the non-income contingent loan scheme, which means that even if you're earning minimum wage, you still have to pay a large amount in servicing your student debt, which is obviously very unfair because those who need student loans tend to come from poorer backgrounds and obviously go on to work in jobs where they can't earn as much money as some of their wealthier peers. So I hope it highlights, and the World Bank has highlighted this as well, that non-income contingent loan schemes do not positively contribute to development.